No one expected the immortal monument of Hollywood to end his life with a bloody testament where Gene Hackman's final breaths were not of serenity, but of soul-twisting screams. Not because of old age, but a pre-scripted self-termination where Gene was both the protagonist, the victim, and the accomplice to fate. He didn't pass away peacefully. Instead, the Santa Fe mansion became a mental torture chamber where Gene was strangled by the obsessions of love, loneliness, and silent manipulation. His final message wasn't a trembling handwritten letter, but a top-secret recording where Gene revealed his most naked face, weak, panicked, and begging for release. Who forced Gene to say those words? Who robbed the final autonomy of a man who once dominated Hollywood? Was it love or control? A monument fell not from age, but from secrets too heavy to carry to the grave. Santa Fe, New Mexico. The sun-drenched land with arid hills and endless skies, where the sunset paints the red rocks with gold. In that seemingly peaceful place, a name quietly withdrew from Hollywood's limelight. Gene Hackman. Audiences knew him for his cold, edgy, and weighty roles. From The French Connection, Unforgiven, to The Conversation, Gene Hackman wasn't just an actor. He was a living symbol of an uncompromising cinematic era, where talent had to scream to earn its place under the lights. Yet, while most of his contemporaries clung to the limelight with final roles or surprise comebacks, Gene Hackman chose the opposite path. He disappeared. Since 2004, when he announced his retirement from acting, Hackman barely made public appearances. No interviews, no events, not even a career retrospective. All that was known was that he and his second wife, Betsy Arakawa, had retreated to a mansion deep in the Santa Fe suburbs, a place he called the Land of Wind and Silence. The mansion quickly earned a haunting name from locals, the Silent Mansion, not just because of its strange isolation, but because of the thick atmosphere surrounding it. Mail carriers rarely saw the owners. Delivery personnel received short messages asking them to leave items at the gate. Even neighbors living a few hundred meters away almost never saw Gene Hackman step outside. He used to be the face of American cinema. Now he's just a shadow behind those walls. A local resident once said, rumors spread from that very silence. Some said Gene Hackman was writing an unpublished memoir. Some believed he was recording his thoughts, his final messages, as a way to speak to future generations. And some believed that Betsy Arakawa, the woman who had weathered many storms with Gene Hackman, had asked him to cut all ties with Hollywood as some unspoken agreement between them. The truth remained unknown, as the Silent Mansion never opened its doors to the curious. The only information that leaked out was a small detail from a plumber hired in 2023. He claimed to have seen an old tape recorder on Gene Hackman's desk with a handwritten note. Final words? Private. No one knew what the recording contained, or if it really existed, or was just an exaggerated fantasy. But what happened next deepened the gloom around Gene Hackman. He canceled all his regular health checkups, refused to answer any messages from former colleagues. A journalist who sent a letter asking about his health received only a blank piece of paper with 3 words, "Let me be." Gene Hackman once said, in a final interview in 2004, "I've played enough men with regrets. I don't want to be one." Yet now, in the sunlit Santa Fe mansion, he became the very shadow of the characters he had portrayed, solitary, brooding, and harboring a secret that no one was allowed to touch. Betsy Arakawa, the woman who had been with Gene for over 30 years, also kept absolute silence. She refused all interview requests, didn't even appear with her husband on his rare outings. It was said that Betsy was the only one who knew about Final Words, the recording believed to be Gene Hackman's last testament, where he revealed his thoughts on his career, love, and the hidden shadows. What haunted many was the timing of the recording. According to the plumber, the tape showed signs of being recorded around early 2024, when Gene Hackman was in his most fragile months. Did Gene Hackman sense something? Did he know that the days ahead wouldn't be his? Or had the Silent Mansion become a mental prison, where each day was a monologue with the past? No one knew, but the Silent Mansion was certainly more than a house. It was the final witness to a legend's secrets, where every wall, every corner, every breeze whispered untold stories. The last photos of Gene Hackman, his thin figure in a worn sweater, his eyes quietly gazing at the New Mexico sky, were like a closing frame of a glorious chapter in Hollywood history. The last frame, no spotlight, no applause, just a man standing in the final silences of his life. And somewhere inside in the vast night sky of Santa Fe, where stars formed a silver net over the arid red earth, stood a mansion as silent as its inhabitants. For over 30 years, Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa had weathered the scorching sun and sweeping winds of the American Southwest. From the outside, they were a perfect couple, a symbol of humble, enduring love, nestled away from Hollywood's limelight. Yet truth is never as simple as it appears. Within the rough stone walls during dinners for two by candlelight existed a vague, fragile bond, a mix of love and possessive obsession. A strange connection, later known by an unspoken name, the final pact. Betsy Arakawa, the petite Hawaiian woman, was once a pianist with graceful hands and gentle eyes, but behind that fragile exterior was a complex soul, full of hurt and haunted by separation. When she first met Gene Hackman in the 80s, Betsy didn't just love him for his fame, or the charm of a veteran star. She loved Gene as if he were her last anchor, a lone piece of driftwood in the ocean that, if lost, she would never find shore. That love was breathtakingly beautiful, but the more beautiful, the more dangerous. Gene Hackman's old friends admitted that after he was with Betsy, many doors quietly closed, unanswered calls, Gene's absence at parties. Gradually, Hackman disappeared from social life, even from those who had stood by him in his early days. "It's not that I left Hollywood, I just wanted to belong somewhere else," Gene once said in a rare moment of candor, but those close to him knew that somewhere else was beside Betsy, where he traded a world outside for the peaceful eyes of the woman he loved. However, that peace was never complete. Whispers among Gene Hackman's old friends revealed that Betsy didn't just love him normally. She was haunted by the idea that Gene would leave her, as too many had left her in the past. But because of that fear, Betsy controlled every breath, every connection, every name in Gene's contact list. Even Gene Hackman's own children, his 3 children from his first marriage, became thorns in Betsy's side. The brief calls between father and children grew rarer. The letters it sent from afar only received silence. No one dared say Betsy interfered, but no one dared deny her invisible presence in every decision Gene Hackman made. The scariest part wasn't the control, but what they had pledged together, a secret life-or-death agreement they called quietly the final pact. No one knew exactly when the agreement started, but vague pieces emerged from fragmented stories from a few old friends. On a starry Santa Fe night in the mansion's backyard, Gene and Betsy sat together under a velvet black sky and vowed that if one passed away first, the other wouldn't be left alone in loneliness. They didn't call it a romantic love vow. It was a life-or-death agreement in the truest sense, a vague commitment between two souls bound together to the end, regardless of right or wrong, regardless of the future. The pieces began to fit when people learned that Betsy always kept a bottle of strong sedatives in her bedside drawer. Gene Hackman, who had never suffered from severe insomnia, took those pills regularly for years. Strange dreams interrupted conversations in the middle of the night when Gene sat blankly by the window, mumbling incomprehensible words. Once an old friend, the only one still in contact with Gene, recalled, "I heard them talking once. They weren't fighting, but it sounded off, like they were planning something neither of them wanted to say out loud, what no one dared ask Gene Hackman directly. Did the final pact really exist? And if so, was it an agreement between two lovers, or a chain binding them in a morbid fear of separation?" Outside, Santa Fe remained silent. The highland winds carried the scent of dry earth and burnt grass, but inside the silent mansion where only two people in a secret agreement existed, time passed differently, slower, more suffocating, and shrouded in an indescribable coldness. Betsy Arakawa, the petite woman Gene Hackman loved dearly, was she a saving angel or a jailer of his soul in his final years? And Gene Hackman, who had played hundreds of strong, powerful characters, did he become a hostage in his own marriage? The answer still lay somewhere in the untouched pieces of the final pact. Santa Fe, in the late winter days, dry winds rustling through the half-closed doors of the old stone mansion at the end of the slope. That house, once where Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa retreated after the Hollywood limelight, now turned into a sealed box for rumors and chilling pieces about the final days of the screen legend. And at the center of all rumors, the most haunting thing to the public was Gene Hackman's final recording. No one knew for sure if the recording existed, but the rumor about it lived longer than any classic film Gene had starred in. Acquaintances, those who had set foot in the Santa Fe mansion before the fateful day, all whispered about something hidden, a secret Gene Hackman tried to take to his final moments, a confession, a desperate whisper in the dark. It was said that the recording was an ordinary handwritten letter, nor a 95-year-old man's hastily written diary entries. Lost between familiar walls, it was a real voice, trembling and naked, each interrupted breath mixed with dry fear. "If you find this, I'm sorry." That was believed to be the opening line, an apology without beginning or end, without destination, without explanation. It echoed in the hoarse voice that was Gene Hackman's trademark, but now it wasn't the voice of Lex Luthor or any fictional character, but the voice of a man facing his own destiny. When the forensic team first entered the mansion, after a call from a delivery person who received no response, they encountered a scene no one could forget. Everything was chillingly neat. The dining table was set for two glass cups facing each other, with only a few drops of amber liquid remaining. On the table, Not books or letters, but a small, old tape recorder nestled among a pile of pristine white napkins. The machine wasn't on. No one had touched it, but it was like a prop, set up waiting for the right person to find it. When an investigator's trembling hand turned on the machine, everything was silent, no sound, no recordings. The memory card was empty, but in the internal report afterward, a detail was recorded. At the bottom of the recorder, there was a strand of silver hair. According to stories passed down among those who had served the Hackman household, Gene had tried voice journaling after turning 90. He didn't write by hand due to age-related tremors. Instead, every night before bed, he turned on the machine, said a few words to himself, small thoughts, fragmented memories, pieces of memories about Hollywood in Betsy. But after a while, he stopped recording, and it was Betsy who put the machine in the safe in the bedroom. It's better this way, she told a close housekeeper. No one knew what she meant, only that since that day, the house seemed to become quiet. Some claimed to have heard Leslie Hackman, Gene's daughter, admit she had a copy of the recording, but Leslie's absolute silence only fueled the rumors. People believed that the recording wasn't just a farewell, but an accusation, maybe about Betsy, about the haunting life or death agreement between them, or even a final plea to escape something. Investigators later, though not finding any recording, noted one thing. The house where Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa passed away was arranged like a cold Broadway stage. Every item, every seat, every family photo, all were arranged in a strange order, almost perfectly symmetrical, as if someone had scripted everything, from the dim light through the windows to the way the two glasses were placed facing each other on the dining table. It wasn't like the scene of a sudden passing. It was like the backstage of a play where Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were the two main actors, and the only audience was fate itself. Among all the faces that appeared, after everything closed, Leslie Hackman's was the most haunting. No crying, no excuses, no explanations. She only said one thing to the press. My father was a storyteller. Even in his final moments, he told the story he wanted to tell. Was there a recording? Was there a cry for help? Was there a horrifying truth buried under the glossy paint of the Santa Fe mansion? No one knew. And that very silence was the most terrifying evidence. When the Hollywood lights went out, when the Santa Fe mansion doors closed forever, people still wondered, what did Gene Hackman say on that final night? And who really listened? There are periods in a person's life that pass quietly, faintly, that no one bothers to remember. But there are also time gaps that become legends, not because they are too loud, but because they completely disappear from the flow of reality. That's what people say about the phantom weeks, the final eerie weeks inside Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's Santa Fe mansion. The neighbors living around Santa Fe, accustomed to the couple's reclusiveness, had never seen the house sink into such absolute self-isolation. No mail delivered, no deliveries, no one coming or going, not even the longtime helpers. The iron gate at the end of the slope was tightly closed, the electric lock constantly activated, the security cameras pointed outwards. But those cameras were the first detail to reveal the abnormality. Data from the surveillance system recorded all exterior cameras stopped working on February 14th at 5:32 p.m., no malfunctions, no sabotage. They were simply disconnected, as if the homeowners had intentionally unplugged the power, freezing their entire living space from outside eyes. From that moment on, all contact with Gene and Betsy gradually disappeared into the void. Information from the local pharmacy revealed a series of puzzling transactions. In the 3 months before the house went into self-isolation, a large amount of sedatives, painkillers, and strong sleeping pills were repeatedly prescribed under Gene and Betsy's names. No one saw them appear directly at the pharmacy. All orders were delivered to the mansion gate, where a delivery person confirmed he was never allowed to pass the gate. Notably, among these medications, some prescriptions were for terminally ill patients, those preparing for a one-way journey. But Gene's medical records showed that despite declining health, he didn't have terminal illnesses, no cancer, no severe neurological disorders. So what were those medications bought for? When investigators broke down the front door to enter the house after a missing person report, they encountered a chilling paradox. The front door was locked from the inside, the old lock perfectly maintained, with no signs of forced entry. All windows, large and small, had their curtains drawn, some even sealed with black tape along the edges, completely blocking natural light. All communication devices, landline phones, mobile phones, tablets, were turned off and neatly stored in drawers, batteries removed. The house's internet was cut off on the same day the cameras stopped working. The entire house was like a sealed ship, floating in space, cutting off all connections with Earth. Throughout the house, signs of life remained, but everything seemed abruptly abandoned. A book Gene was reading, face down on an armchair, A cold cup of tea, the surface covered with a thin, mist-like film. Clean clothes, folded but unworn. Everything seemed to stop in a single moment, then suspended in limbo. The refrigerator was full of food, but there were no signs of cooking for weeks. The bedside lamp was on 24/7, but the double bed was almost untouched. The phantom weeks weren't just a period of disappearance, but a gap between life and death, where people existed without truly living. A room on the second floor, where Betsy used to practice piano, was completely transformed. Instead of the piano and music stand, a long table covered with a white cloth stood in the center of the room, on which strange items were neatly arranged. A thick notebook listing Jean and Betsy's favorite songs, not to listen to, but to use in a ceremony. A large medicine box divided into compartments by time, with doses of extremely strong painkillers. 2 sealed envelopes without recipient names. Everything in that room was like a small altar for the homeowners, where they get prepared for their own passing. Every detail, every breath, no signs of external intrusion, no violence, no signs is a struggle. All evidence pointed to a single possibility. Jean and Betsy had chosen to seal themselves in the house, preparing for a meticulously planned departure. But why? Why would a legend who once strode proudly on red carpets, an immortal icon of the silver screen, choose to quietly disappear behind cold stone walls? What made 2 people who had been together for half their lives perform such a strange self-isolation ritual? Were they afraid of something? Or did they turn themselves into actors in a final play where the stage was the Santa Fe mansion and the only audience was absolute silence? The phantom weeks passed as if they had never existed. All recorded data was erased. All witnesses were silent, including Leslie Hackman, the only one called before the police broke down the door. And when Leslie stood in the empty room looking at the bare wall, she only said one sentence. They wrote their own script. I couldn't change it. Those phantom weeks will perhaps forever be a locked, dark space where memories, fears, and truths blend, waiting for someone brave enough to step through the final door. Is love salvation or a gilded cage? That question haunted Leslie Hackman from the moment she stood on the porch of the Santa Fe mansion, watching the heavy wooden door close behind the forensics team. Gene Hackman, the father who stood as an unshakable icon in Leslie's memory, was now a fractured legacy, where pieces of the past fell away with each step she took deeper into the final mystery. Throughout nearly 30 years together, Betsy Arakawa was always portrayed by the media as a woman in the shadows, quietly supporting Gene Hackman. But as the pieces from the Phantom Weeks were pieced together, Leslie began to see a different picture. Betsy wasn't just a companion. She might have been the director. Medical records Leslie gathered from Santa Fe hospitals and Gene's private doctors revealed puzzling details. While Gene was still lucid enough to make decisions about his treatment, from medication and counseling to long-term care plans, all prescriptions for sleeping pills, sedatives, and high-dose painkillers were under Betsy's name. There were no direct orders from Gene. Betsy signed, Betsy received, Betsy held the key to medicine cabinet. From calorie-precise diets to rare guest visits, everything in Gene's life went through Betsy's filters. Initially, Leslie thought it was love, a devoted wife's love for her aging husband. But the deeper she delved into the notes, the emails between Betsy and the medical team, the more that love resembled a gilded chain. Gene shouldn't watch the news for too long. Gene needs to avoid people who upset him. Gene should take this medication instead of that one. Every decision, no matter how small, went through Betsy, even how Gene should think about death. Leslie vividly remembered the Gene Hackman, in his prime, strong yet tough. No one could impose their thoughts on him. He chose roles instinctively, rejected million-dollar scripts simply because he didn't like them. He engaged in heated arguments with directors, walked off sets if he felt disrespected. Yet, in his old age, that man almost disappeared. In his final interviews, Leslie saw her father speak from scripts Betsy prepared, avoiding sensitive questions. His eyes darted away. His hand rested on Betsy's as if holding a lifeline or perhaps being held tightly. From 2017, when Gene's health began to decline, Leslie noticed a shift in the balance of power. Betsy became the sole spokesperson, making all decisions for Gene, even refusing interview or film comeback offers without consulting him. Leslie recalled a summer night in 2009 when she made a surprise visit without warning. Betsy didn't open the door immediately. When Leslie insisted on waiting, she reluctantly let her in. Gene sat in the living room, but his eyes were as cloudy as dusty glass, his smile strained, and every sentence began with, "Betsy thinks that. Betsy told me I should listen to Betsy." That the powerful father of yesteryear was now diminished in his own life, like an extra actor standing on the sidelines waiting for someone to give him his lines. Betsy always insisted that all decisions about treatment, medication, and even the day of their passing were Jean's own choices. But Leslie didn't believe it. The prescriptions Betsy received, the handwritten notes left in the bedroom where Betsy listed tasks to help Jean pass peacefully, told a different story. The biggest question haunted Leslie. Did Gene Hackman really want to pass away? Or did Betsy decide that for him? Leslie's silence after hearing Jean's top-secret recording wasn't just from the pain of losing her father. It was also fear. Fear that the voice on the recording wasn't Gene Hackman anymore, but just Betsy's echo through words he was forced to read. She didn't hate Betsy, couldn't hate the woman who had cared for her father for nearly 3 decades. But gratitude wasn't enough to fill the suspicion that Gene Hackman, the icon of strength and freedom, might have lived his final years as a puppet controlled by a sweet, manipulative love. And when the Santa Fe mansion doors closed for the last time, Leslie knew. The answer to Gene Hackman's fate, who really held the key, would be forever locked in that house, along with the buried secrets. There are houses that never truly become ruins, even when the inhabitants have long gone. The Santa Fe mansion is one such place. It's not just Gene Hackman's final retirement villa, but a living entity, breathing with every footstep, silent with every breeze that are never fully closed. The people of Santa Fe call it the Whispering House. Stories spread from neighbors, former maintenance staff, and even those who glimpsed Gene Hackman standing by the window, gazing distantly towards the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The whispers never cease. It's believed that Gene and Betsy's breaths never left the house. Not physical ghosts, but a stream of memories forever trapped, replaying like an old worn film. Fragments of conversations, midnight footsteps echoing on the wooden floors, the sound of doors opening and closing softly, even though the mansion's tightly locked. They loved each other, a love strong enough to burn both souls, but they also feared each other, feared losing the other, feared a day without someone to cling to in the darkness of old age. That fear turned the house into a living tomb, burying every smile, every unfinished dream. Leslie Hackman, Jean's sole heir, didn't sell the house, nor did she move in, but she returns once a year on the anniversary of her father's passing, standing before the heavy wooden door, her trembling hand on the doorknob, but never daring to turn it. "I hear him," Leslie once said in a rare interview, not a clear voice, just a feeling, a presence, a sadness hanging in the air. There are things he never said, questions he never asked, and now they're all trapped in that house. Did Gene Hackman really leave a final recording? That question haunted journalists, fans, and documentary filmmakers who tried to approach Leslie, but no one heard the recording except her. Not a second of sound, not a copy was revealed. Some believe the tape contains dark truths about love, control, the secret agreement between Gene and Betsy in their final days. Others believe the recording wasn't Gene's farewell to the world, but his farewell to himself, a self-written, self-read sentence closing his own life. Leslie didn't confirm. She only said some secrets should be buried with the departed. The house still stands, solitary on the hillside. No one dares to buy it. Documentary crews who asked to film encountered strange malfunctions when entering the backyard. The footage was distorted, lost sound, or recorded unexplained noises like the dragging of wooden chairs, the sighing of someone in an empty room. The Santa Fe mansion isn't just a property. It's a living mausoleum where secrets are locked in every piece of wood, every brick, every window gap. Anyone who enters feels invisible eyes watching, questions hanging in the air, questions that perhaps only Gene Hackman, Betsy Arakawa, and Leslie Hackman know the answers to. As for the outside world, we only hear the whispers of the house, echoes of love, fear, and truths that never revealed. And when the Santa Fe mansion doors close at sunset, it doesn't just close a day, it closes a chapter of the mystery without an ending.